You know that feeling when you open your fridge and there's nothing but a sad-looking carrot and some expired milk? Well, Native Americans would have never let that happen. While we panic buy bread and milk when there's an inch of snow in the forecast, they had their winter food situation figured out months in advance. Let me tell you about my grandmother's basement pantry. It's packed with enough canned tomatoes to survive 3 apocalypses. But that's nothing compared to what Native American communities accomplished. They didn't have the luxury of running to Walmart when supplies ran low. Instead, they turned their entire late summer and fall into one massive food prep operation. They didn't just store food, they transformed it. Meat wasn't just cut and saved, it was smoked using specific types of wood that added flavor while preserving the meat for months. Fun fact, some tribes discovered that certain types of maple wood not only preserved the meat, but also made it taste better than your favorite BBQ joint. The smoke would curl up through specially designed racks, turning fresh game into winter-ready provisions that could last through the harshest months. Fish got the special treatment too. Ever tried to dry fish in your backyard? Don't. Your neighbors won't appreciate it. Native Americans perfected this art, creating what I like to call fish jerky. They catch salmon during spawning seasons and hang hundreds of fillets on elaborate wooden structures. The fish would dry in the late summer wind, becoming so lightweight and compact that a single person could carry enough to feed their family for weeks. But this is where they really shined, the underground food cache system. These weren't just holes in the ground, they were the original root cellars, and they worked better than your expensive refrigerator. They dug deep pits, lined them with grass and bark, and created different layers for different foods. Berries went into birch bark containers, which kept them from getting crushed. Dried corn and other grains were stored in carefully sewn leather pouches that kept out moisture. They'd often create false caches to fool both animals and rival tribes. It's like having a fake wallet to give to thieves, except this was for survival. They'd make obvious storage spots with a little food, while the real stockpiles were hidden so well that archaeologists are still discovering them today. Recent findings in the northern plains revealed food caches that were over 400 years old, still containing preserved seeds and dried berries. Temperature control was crucial, and they mastered it without electricity. In regions where temperatures plunged to minus 34 degrees, they used the cold to their advantage. Natural cave formations became nature's freezers. They'd store meat in these caves where it would freeze solid, ready to be chipped off and thawed when needed. Some tribes even created ice pits, digging deep holes that stayed cold enough to preserve food well into spring. These pits maintained temperatures just above freezing, around 34 to 36 degrees Fahrenheit, creating perfect storage conditions. They had to guard these stockpiles from bears who apparently appreciated good food storage as much as humans did. One tribe's oral history tells of a young warrior who spent an entire night in a tree after a bear decided to investigate their food cache. The next day, they found him still up there, holding onto his spear and shivering, not from the cold, but from watching the bear enjoy their winter supplies. But perhaps the most impressive part wasn't just the storage itself, it was the planning. They had to calculate exactly how much food an entire community would need for up to 6 months of winter. Get it wrong, and people would starve. Modern studies suggest they were incredibly accurate, usually storing about 2,000 calories per person per day, with extra for the elderly and children. For a village of 100 people, that meant storing over 36 million calories to last through winter. That's about 18,000 Big Macs worth of food. The whole process took incredible coordination. While some groups focused on hunting and fishing, others gathered berries and wild grains. Children helped by collecting firewood for smoking meat and fish. Even the elderly participated, using their experience to determine the best storage spots and teaching younger generations the precise techniques for food preservation. Some tribes even developed a kind of food library system, marking their various caches with specific signs only their community members could understand. Speaking of careful planning, you might wonder how they managed all this when the snow was too deep to even check their storage sites. That's where hunting came in. All that stored food was great, but fresh meat was still essential during those long winter months. Now, tracking animals in winter might sound easier than during other seasons. After all, footprints in snow, right? Well, my friend who's been hunting for 30 years still manages to get lost following deer tracks in his own backyard. Native Americans, though, they turned winter tracking into an art form that would put modern GPS to shame. The snow itself became their newspaper, telling stories most of us wouldn't even notice. A slight depression in the snow? That meant an animal had passed through hours ago. Broken twigs at deer height? Breakfast was heading north. They could even tell if an animal was sick or healthy just by looking at its tracks. Something that meant the difference between wasting energy on a chase that might last days or finding an easier target. Their tracking skills went way beyond just following footprints. Did you know they could locate moose by looking for steam rising from their breath above the trees? At negative 30 degrees, that warm moose breath would create a visible vapor column visible from nearly a mile away. Modern thermal imaging cameras work on basically the same principle, just with fancier equipment and a much bigger price tag. It's really smart how they moved through the snow. A few months ago, I had no idea what a health ring even was until my fiancée got me one, and I have to say, I'm shocked this isn't a widely known and used product. It tracks my stress levels, and what I found out is that some supplements made my stress score spike, while others actually helped bring it down. I adjusted a few things based on that, and honestly, I feel 10 years younger. My wife mainly uses it to track her menstrual cycles, and she is obsessed with her sleep quality score. I noticed they are currently running a limited 69% discount, but I don't know how long it will last. It's currently only $60, and it's clear. This one is the best bang for your buck, with other health rings priced around $350 with less functions. They managed to price it this low because they cut out the middleman like Amazon, Walmart, etc., who drive up the price and take a big margin, ending up with the customer paying 3 to 5 times more. If you are on TV, you can check it out yourself by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone camera or clicking the first link in the description of this video. Modern hunters sound like a bowl of Rice Krispies out there. Snap, crackle, pop with every step. Native Americans developed special snowshoes that spread their weight so perfectly that they could walk right up to a herd without making a sound. These weren't the aluminum frame tennis rackets we use today for winter hiking. They crafted them from wood and sinew with designs so efficient that modern engineers are still studying them. Each tribe had their own design based on their local snow conditions. Longer ones for powder snow, rounder ones for wet snow. They even had what I call the snow trap method. They'd strategically drive animals into deep snow drifts where the heavy creatures would get stuck while the hunters, on their snowshoes, could practically dance around them. It's like those comedy scenes where someone is chasing a burglar who keeps slipping on ice, except this version ended with dinner. The clothing they wore for hunting was just as clever as their tracking methods. Those soft-soled moccasins weren't just a fashion statement, they could feel every twig and branch through them, helping them move silently even when they couldn't see the ground. They'd even rub snow on their clothes to eliminate human scent. Talk about dedication. I can barely handle a snowball fight without running inside for hot chocolate, but they developed different hunting strategies for different weather conditions. When the temperature dropped below minus 20 degrees, animals would gather in sheltered areas to conserve energy. The hunters knew exactly where these spots would be, based on wind direction and terrain. They mapped these locations in their heads better than any modern hunting app could. Some of these winter hunting grounds were so reliable that tribes would travel hundreds of miles just to reach them. They even used the harsh weather to their advantage. During blizzards, most animals would bed down and wait out the storm, but certain tribes would actually hunt during these conditions, using the wind noise to mask their approach and the poor visibility to get incredibly close to their prey. Now that's what I call extreme weather hunting. Makes those TV survival shows look like a walk in the park. The success rate of these winter hunting techniques was remarkable. Studies of ancient hunting sites show that some tribes maintained a 70% success rate during winter hunts. That's better than most modern hunters with all their high-tech gear. Of course, they had to be successful. Missing a shot didn't just mean going home empty-handed, it meant the whole community might go hungry. While all this land hunting was impressive, some of the most ingenious techniques came into play when the lakes and rivers froze over. My buddy likes to brag about his ice fishing setup. Heated tent, power auger, sonar fish finder, and enough snacks to feed a small army. Last weekend, he spent 4 hours drilling holes and didn't catch a single fish. Meanwhile, Native American ice fishing techniques from centuries ago were so effective that a single fishing hole could feed dozens of people in just a few hours. First, they had to crack through ice that could be 3 feet thick. No fancy gas-powered augers back then, just stone tools, bone chisels, and a whole lot of determination. They'd heat rocks in fires until they were glowing hot, then place them on the ice. The rocks would melt through a few inches, then they'd chip away the weakened ice. Slow? You bet. But they turned it into an assembly line. While one group heated rocks, another group chipped ice, and a third group prepared the fishing gear. The tools they made would put modern fishing gear to shame. Those bone spears weren't just sharp sticks, they were engineering masterpieces. The tips were designed with special barbs that would lock into a fish, but could be easily removed without damaging the meat. Some tribes even created multi-pronged spears that could catch several fish at once. It's like the difference between using chopsticks and using a fork, except these forks had to work in freezing water, in the dark, through a hole in the ice. They figured out how to use the ice's clarity to their advantage. In early winter, when the ice was clear, they'd cover themselves with dark blankets and lay right on the ice. The darkness would eliminate glare, letting them spot fish swimming below. They became human sonar systems, no batteries required. Some elders could even hear fish swimming under the ice by pressing their ears against it. Try explaining that technique to someone who thinks fishing requires a $500 fish finder. But the real smart thing was in their trap systems. Modern fish traps are pretty simple, one way in, no way out. Native American ice traps were like underwater mazes. They'd create networks of basket traps connected by guide nets. Fish swimming along would find themselves guided into larger and larger traps until they reached a main collection area. These traps worked 24/7, catching fish even while everyone was sleeping. Temperature management was crucial. Every time they opened a fishing hole, they risked freezing their hands. The solution? They developed special mittens made from beaver fur that could be quickly slipped on and off. The mittens were waterproof thanks to a coating of seal or fish oil, and the fur was arranged so water would roll right off. Modern ice fishermen still haven't improved much on this design, except maybe by adding electric hand warmers that run out of battery just when you need them most. Storage was another challenge they mastered. Ever wonder how they kept fish fresh without freezers? They built underwater holding pens near the fishing holes. Fish kept in these pens stayed alive and fresh, basically creating a living refrigerator. The water temperature stayed just above freezing, and the fish's own movement kept the water from freezing solid. Recent studies have shown these pens could keep fish alive for weeks, much longer than modern catch-and-keep methods. The numbers are pretty impressive, too. Archaeological evidence from one ancient fishing site in Michigan showed that a single community could catch and store over 2,000 pounds of fish during the winter months. That's enough to provide protein for 100 people for several months. Modern commercial ice fishing operations, with all their technology, often can't match that efficiency rate. To put it in perspective, that's about the weight of a small car of fish, all caught through holes in the ice. They even developed special signals and codes for ice fishing. Different drum beats on the ice meant different things. Fish spotted, need help, or danger, thin ice. The ice itself became a communication system. These signals could travel for miles across frozen lakes, keeping fishing groups coordinated and safe. A steady rhythm meant fish here, while rapid tapping warned of dangerous ice conditions. Kids would often serve as message runners, skating from hole to share news of good fishing spots. One of their cleverest tricks was using decoys carved from wood and bone. These fake fish were painted with natural dyes and suspended in the water to attract larger fish. They'd even attach shiny shells or polished stones to make them flash in the water. Nature's first fishing lures. Modern lure companies spend millions developing new designs, but these ancient decoys still catch fish just as well today. When the fish weren't biting, there were always other options for food. Some of them might surprise you. Take pine trees, for example. That inner bark isn't just tree skin, it's basically nature's pasta. They'd peel back the rough outer bark to get to the soft, moist inner layer that's packed with vitamins and carbohydrates. They'd dry it, pound it into flour, and mix it with other ingredients to make bread. Recent lab analysis shows this tree flour contained more vitamin C than an orange. The same stuff we use to make paper today kept entire communities alive through winter. Those weren't the only trees on the menu. Birch trees produced a sweet sap that could be boiled down into syrup. Not as sweet as maple syrup, but loaded with medicinal properties. Some tribes collected over 50 gallons of birch sap per tree during late winter. That's about 600 cups of natural energy drink, and it actually tastes better than those fluorescent-colored beverages people chug at the gym. The champ of winter survival were roots and tubers. Native Americans didn't just dig them up and eat them raw. They had a whole underground root storage system that would make a modern root cellar look amateur. They'd harvest these plants in fall and bury them in special pits lined with grass and pine needles. The ground temperature stayed just above freezing, creating perfect storage conditions. It's like having a natural refrigerator that never needs electricity. They could find edible plants under 3 feet of snow. They developed special tools made from antlers and bones that could probe through the snow to locate specific plants. They knew exactly which plants would still be good to eat even after being frozen solid. Cattails were particularly prized. These plants are like the Swiss Army knife of wild edibles. The roots could be ground into flour, the young shoots eaten like corn on the cob, and the pollen collected to thicken soups. But perhaps the most surprising food source was clay. Yes, actual clay from the earth. Before you start thinking they were eating mud pies, this wasn't any old dirt. They discovered certain types of clay contained essential minerals their bodies needed during winter. Modern scientists have analyzed these clay deposits and found they're rich in calcium, iron, and other minerals. It's basically nature's multivitamin. They'd mix small amounts of this clay into their food or make it into little balls that could be sucked on throughout the day. Some tribes even ate lichen off rocks, the same stuff you probably see growing on your garden wall. But not just any lichen. They knew exactly which species were edible and how to prepare them to remove bitter compounds. One type, called rock tripe, could be boiled into a thick, nutritious soup. Studies show it contains about as much protein as beef jerky. My neighbor's expensive protein shakes don't even come close. The really impressive part was their knowledge of preservation. They could take bitter acorns and turn them into sweet, nutritious flour through a complex leaching process. They'd collect thousands of acorns in fall, shell them, grind them into flour, and then repeatedly wash the flour to remove the bitter tannins. One mature oak tree could produce up to 1,000 pounds of acorns, enough to make hundreds of pounds of flour. A single tree could provide more calories than an acre of wheat. They even found ways to preserve berries and fruits they gathered in summer. Instead of letting them freeze solid, they'd dry them and mix them with rendered fat and meat to make pemmican, a complete survival food that would last for months. The fat preserved the berries and kept them from freezing solid. It's like the original energy bar, except it actually tastes good and doesn't have a wrapper that'll outlive your grandchildren. But sometimes, even with all these backup food sources, winter could stretch longer than expected. When that happened, communities had to make some tough choices. The winter of 1805 was brutal. Lewis and Clark's expedition would have failed if Native American tribes hadn't shared their survival knowledge. The explorers were down to eating candles and boiling their own moccasins for soup when local tribes taught them survival techniques that had been perfected over thousands of years. Today, we throw away food because it's one day past the best-by date, but these ancient survival methods could turn practically anything into life-sustaining nutrition. Bone broth wasn't just a trendy health drink back then. When food got scarce, every single bone became precious. They'd crack them open to get at the marrow, the fatty tissue inside that contains more calories than a hamburger. Then, they'd boil these bones up to 5 times, each time getting a weaker but still nutritious broth. Analysis of ancient cooking sites shows they could extract up to 3,000 calories from a single large animal's bones. That's about 15 candy bars worth of energy from stuff we usually throw away. They discovered that certain bones worked better than others. Leg bones had the most marrow, while skull bones could be boiled the longest. They'd even save old bones from previous meals, knowing they might need them later. Some archaeological sites have found bone fragments that show evidence of being boiled up to 7 times. Talk about stretching your resources. Modern science has proven they were onto something. Bone broth contains minerals, collagen, and amino acids that help prevent malnutrition. When the bones ran out, they turned to leather. Yes, actual leather. Boots, bags, straps, anything made from animal hide. They'd cut it into small pieces, scrape off the hair, boil it until it was soft, and eat it. Before you wrinkle your nose, consider this. Leather is basically pure protein. Those old moccasins might taste terrible, but they contain about as much protein as a chicken breast. My grandmother used to say, "Waste not, want not." These folks took that to a whole new level. The clever part was how they prepared these last resort foods. They'd mix in herbs that were not just for flavor, but also helped with digestion. Certain pine needles, for example, would be added to bone broth not only for taste, but also because they're rich in vitamin C. This helped prevent scurvy during long winters when fresh food wasn't available. Some of these herb combinations are still being studied by scientists today for their medicinal properties. Trading became crucial during these desperate times. Different tribes developed complex trading networks that could span hundreds of miles. If one community had a surplus and another was struggling, they'd find ways to help each other. They used smoke signals that could relay messages about food availability across vast distances. One puff meant, "We have extra." Two puffs meant, "We need help." These networks were so effective that anthropologists estimate they reduced winter starvation deaths by up to 60%. The whole community worked together to survive. Everyone from kids to elders had a role. Children would be sent to check snares because they were light enough to walk on crusty snow without breaking through. Elders who couldn't hunt anymore became experts at extracting every possible calorie from what was available. They knew exactly how long to boil different materials to make them edible without wasting precious fuel. But perhaps the most powerful survival tool wasn't a technique or a recipe. It was their attitude toward sharing. Food was never hoarded by individuals. Studies of ancient winter camps show evidence of communal cooking areas where food was prepared and shared equally. Even in times of extreme scarcity, they maintained this practice. Archaeological evidence suggests that in some communities, the elderly and children would eat first, the opposite of what you might expect in a survival situation. Modern survivalists buy expensive equipment and stockpile freeze-dried meals, but they often miss the most important lesson from Native American winter survival. No one survives alone. These communities made it through brutal winters, not just because of their skills and knowledge, but because they stuck together. A single person with all the survival knowledge in the world wouldn't last as long as a community working together. Looking back at all their winter survival methods, from food storage to tracking, from ice fishing to eating boots, one thing becomes clear. They didn't just survive winter, they mastered it. Maybe there's a lesson in there somewhere about resilience, community, and the incredible adaptability of human beings.